Hey guys, my name is Oxy, and today I'm going to be taking you through advanced hunter movement. If you are interested in hunters at all, this guide will be interesting to you as we're going to cover a lot of tips that you might not know about. Now, before I get started, I want to clear up one thing in specific, because I see a lot of times people saying hunters are supposed to be the fastest class, and this is not true in my opinion. Hunters are not meant to be fast necessarily, although they generally are. Their focus as a class is to be really agile, to be able to change directions at a moment's notice. So whenever people see like Titans and Warlocks being able to skate and hunters can't, they get upset about that. I say that's fine, let them have their skates. Hunters have the dodge, which is the best PvP class ability in the game, in my opinion. Before we get into the details, I want to cover general mobility. So looking at the mobility stat, this only increases your strafe speed and jump height. This does not increase your sprint speed. So running around like this, I'm not getting any sprint speed increase from the mobility stat. If I stop to strafe, aim down sights while shooting, all of that ties into mobility, so mobility will increase that. And your initial jump height, so your first jump. This does not count ability jumps, so if I do the extra jumps, those do not benefit directly from mobility. But because it increases the first jump, they benefit indirectly, obviously, because if I get higher on the first jump, my successive jumps will also be higher. Now, there are a couple of ways to buff your sprint speed, and the main way is exotics. Every class has access to a pair of exotic legs that increases the sprint speed. For the hunter, it's the Stomp Ease. These give you a better sprint, a better slide, and higher jumps. So running around now, I'm getting the sprint buff from the Stomp Ease, and I'm running a lot faster. And just to demonstrate the increased slide for you, here it is from the top of the stairs, about to the edge. Swap off. And that wasn't very good. I went a little late. And about to there, halfway, is where you go without it. Now, Stompies are pretty cool because they buff your sprint and your slide and your jump. And we're going to be getting into this later when we talk specifically about jumps, but all your jumps, including the first jump and your ability jumps, do benefit from Stompies. So they're a very powerful mobility tool. Another way you can buff your sprint speed is with a lightweight frame weapon. So if you have any weapon that has a lightweight frame, could be any primary, shotgun, doesn't really matter. You will move faster when you have that weapon out. So right here, I have my recluse out, I'm getting a sprint buff from that, and it is faster than if I would just be running with my sniper rifle out. Now, hunters are fun because they actually have access to subclass specific sprint buffs. So as you can see, this focus breathing here for bottom tree arc strider increases my maximum sprint speed. And then you also have a similar thing on top tree Night Stalker. You sprint and sneak faster. So this is actually probably the best one because it increases your crouch speed as well. Whereas the bottom tree arc strider only increases your sprint speed, although it also gives you your dodge back faster while you're sprinting. So Hunter has access to 3 different types of sprint buffs. But here's where it's kind of important to pay attention because the number of sprint buffs you can stack caps out at 2. So right now, I'm actually over the sprint buff limit because I have one here, I have one from the lightweight weapon, and I have one from my Stomp Ease. So right now, if I'm running around and I pull this out, I'm still actually at the max sprint speed because I still am benefiting from 2 sprint buffs, the Stomp Ease and the subclass, even though I don't have the lightweight weapon out. Now, if I were to take the Stomp Ease off, now I currently only have 1 sprint buff active, so I'm a little bit slower, and then if I swap, I have 2. So keep this in mind when playing Hunter, as you want to be aware that you're not wasting your sprint buffs too much or putting too much emphasis on buffing your sprint. Now obviously it's perfectly fine to run a loadout like this with the Stomp Ease and you're overstacking the sprint buffs a little bit because this is a strong loadout. Just don't expect it to make you go super fast because it will cap out at 2. Alright, I want to talk about something very important to Hunter regarding the Hunter jump, and that is the fact that you can actually change the height of your Hunter jump based on whether you press or hold your jump key. So going on this wall, I'm just going to use the normal jump, no ability jumps, just one single jump, and for the first jump I'm going to tap it. Alright, so that's how high I went. And now for the second jump, I'm going to hold it. And you can see, I went up a little bit higher. Now, this applies to all of Hunter's jumps, including the ability jumps, not just that first jump. So if you want to go really high, you want to hold the button on each jump. So hold, hold, hold. And then if I do the same thing just tapping, tap, tap, tap. You can see the difference is pretty significant as to how high you can get. Now, this doesn't mean you always want to be holding the button. Sometimes you don't want to go too high. Like, for example, if I just want to peek a little bit over this wall, kind of see where people are, but I don't want to expose myself to anyone who might be sitting down there by the tree, then I just want to tap the button just a little bit, just so I can sort of see what's going on down there. But if I want to see all the way, I hold and I can see all the way down to the tree. So it's really important to keep in mind when you're tapping and when you're holding, both to get that extra initial height and not to overexpose yourself in midair. Now, Hunter has 3 types of jumps, and I'm going to cover them all. We're going to start with high jump. This gives you 1 ability jump, so 2 jumps, a double jump, and your ability jump goes really, really high. It's about where you get to, just off the 1 jump. Now, this is probably the least useful of all the Hunter jumps in my opinion. I don't really ever use it in PvE, and in PvP you can use it with certain builds, but I tend to only use them with specific weapon combos. One of the ways I do like to use it is to go full Stomp Ease, put a mountaintop in my kinetic slot, and then you can basically just teleport to the skybox. One other thing that's really fun about doing it like this is you actually go up so fast that it's very hard for someone to track you unless they're anticipating the Stompy boosted high jump. So you can hover way, way above where people would normally be checking and just bring down explosives on them. Very fun build to use, very easy to implement, very annoying to play against. So that's high jump. Now the jump that most hunters are probably going to just glue themselves to is triple jump. This jump gives you 2 additional ability jumps in the air instead of just the 1. So you get 3 jumps total going off the ground. Now, this is extremely good for jumping puzzles because it tends to give you the most amount of distance. It gives you a really good amount of height, and it gives you the ability to change your direction mid-air. So you see, you can kind of go back and land on the platform. Now, your momentum still affects your jumps. Obviously, you can see my first in-air jump, I kind of had to move myself backwards, and there I didn't even get it. So it's not like you can turn on a dime with these in the air, but they still give you a little bit of extra control, which is really nice. Now, in PvP, I think these jumps are overrated. I think triple jump is a little bit overrated in PvP, and people use it too much. And the reason I think that is the case is because of jump lock. Now, if you don't know, whenever you jump off the ground, you can fire your weapon freely. But if you jump in the air, so an ability jump, it locks your weapon out from firing. So as you can see, I'm just holding on the trigger here. I'm not stopping my shots at any point, but the game is stopping it for me because every time I press the jump key, I get locked into that animation. So what this means is that if you're running triple jump, you're taking 2 lockouts on your firing every time you try to hit your max height or your max distance. And this gets even worse when you're using something that's a low fire rate weapon like a sniper rifle or a shotgun, because with an SMG, a few bullets here and there, it's not too big a deal, but if you can't get the timing right on a sniper or a shotgun shot, it is huge. So here, I'm gonna actually put my mouse right next to my microphone so you can kind of hear when I try to shoot. So I'm gonna do a double jump and I'm gonna shoot right after I hit the double jump key. Here we go. And that's a huge delay. You could hear how long that was. Let me do it one more time. 1. Boom. It is very, very hard to tell. 1 jump, fire, and delay. So triple jump severely locks you out of being able to fight effectively in midair. You basically have to choose, do I want to be mobile in the air, or do I want to be able to deal damage in midair? And that's not very good. And so that's where our last jump comes in, the strafe jump. So you get the most directional control per your jump after this. You only get the 1 air jump, so it's a double jump, just like the high jump. but it lets you strafe around in air very well. It gives you a huge amount of distance. This is actually one of the best jumps for distance. And it gives you reasonable height as well, and best of all, it does not lock you out 2 times. It only locks you out the 1 time. And then you still have that in-air control with your strafe, so you can still be mobile in the air. I think Strafe Jump is probably the best jump overall for PvP, and I think people really underestimate it. Now, one of the nice things about Strafe Jump is it goes really fast, and this is going to help with our next little trick, which is something called roof boosting. Now, there isn't really a good spot on this map to do it, but this is probably the best spot, like right here. Maybe even down here. Yeah, this is a good spot. So the way Hunter Jump works is anytime there's a ceiling above you, especially like a low one like this, you can boost yourself into the jump. Sorry, you can use your jump to boost yourself into the ceiling in order to get a little bit of speed. Like so. And that's actually going to increase your movement speed as long as you're doing that, even above your maximum sprint speed, because you're getting extra momentum from banging your head off the top of the ceiling. Don't ask me how or why it works. This is just Destiny's wonky physics at work, but it is the case. And this applies PvE, PvP, any like tight tunnel we have to crouch through in PvE. That will also work if you spam your jump key, but the Strafe Jump is extremely good at getting extra bursts of speed. So if you're rolling out on a map, let's say you spawn up here and you want to contest down there, you can use this technique just to get yourself a little bit of extra time to get to the sight line before the other guy. So Strafe Jump is also extremely useful for this, in addition to not locking you out of your firing. Now, with jumps out of the way, I want to talk about dodges. So there's 2 dodges, Marksman Dodge and Gambler's Dodge. Marksman reloads your gun, whatever gun you have equipped. Gamblers will recharge your melee ability if you do it near an enemy. And it's kind of up to you which one you pick. Since this is a movement guide, I'm actually not going to comment on whether a reload or a melee recharge is better. We're just going to talk about movement. So looking first at the Marksman's Dodge. Looks like that. You do a little roll to the side, and it's pretty good. Let's take a look at the Gambler's Dodge. And that is much better from a movement perspective. Now, it's not faster, it doesn't go any farther or anything, but the reason that Gambler's Dodge is better is because it changes your hitbox. You notice when I was using the Marksman's Dodge that even though he did a little spin, he was basically standing the exact same height. Like, my head was at the same height, so somebody who was tracking me could really just track my head and track it at head level and still hit me. But with Gambler's Dodge, I do a full roll on the ground, which means that my head hitbox is going all over the place. It's very hard to hit, and also I'm lower to the ground because I do the tuck and roll. So purely from a movement standpoint, Gambler's Dodge is the better dodge. Now, just to cover dodge basics, you can go in any direction with dodge. Whichever direction you're strafing when you hit the ability is the direction you go. So if I'm going right, I go right. If I'm going back, I go back, etc. Very simple. One thing to keep in mind with your dodge is that you can also use it to peek third person. So let's say there might be a sniper down there. I'm not sure. I want to find out. Boom, I can dodge into the wall there and see. It's a little bit harder than the other class abilities to use because, especially when you're on the move, because you can't flick your camera always. But especially when you have a wall like this, just to turn your camera just a little bit, see to the side, it's very, very good. Now, I already sort of mentioned it, but when you're moving around and you're using the dodge for movement, you can actually change your direction mid-dodge just by turning your camera. So let's say I'm going to dodge straight forward, and I'm only going to hold forward. I'm only holding W, so I'm not holding to the side or anything, no diagonally, just straight forward. But I'm going to turn my aim to the side as I do it. So you can see I got all the way around, like almost a 90-degree turn around that kiosk. And this is something that you need to incorporate just naturally as a fundamental part of your hunter movement. I actually had a friend who didn't even know how to do this for like almost a year, and he was a hunter main as well. So you don't want to be like that. You want to be using your mouse or your analog stick or whatever to influence your aim in order to get around corners better. For example, let's find a good spot to do it. Let's say I'm running from somebody back here and they're shooting at me and I want to get to cover. I can dodge forward and then strafe into cover, and it works, I guess. It's a little slow, but I can just dodge and turn my mouse and I'm already into cover. Much smoother, much faster, much less awkward, and it gets me out of line of sight of the guy behind me shooting at me a lot better. Now, especially if you're on a mouse and keyboard, you can actually make this pretty dramatic. Like, I can dodge straight forward and flick my mouse behind me so that I end up going in the other direction, like that. You see, I started going that way, but I ended up going that way. And you could pull off some crazy moves mid-gunfight and juke people out by flicking your mouse around and changing your direction. So you really want to get a handle on that, and you want to just get it natural to the point where you're not even thinking about where you're going, what you're doing, you're just dodging. You can even use it if you're getting up close on someone, like to dodge a quick shotgun blast, like go out to the side and back in. And that can be the difference between life and death in a close quarters scenario. Now, I see a lot of players that maybe aren't familiar with Hunter or don't understand the way you play Hunter in PvP, asking why dodge is the best, or even claiming that dodge is not the best, or even sometimes claiming that dodge is the worst class ability in PvP. And I tend to find new players to Hunter will try to use the dodge as if it has iframes. Like, they'll be out in the open, they'll be dueling someone, they'll be fighting, and then they'll dodge, and they'll expect the dodge to just save them by itself. And that's really not the case. Now, you can use the bottom tree Arc Strider dodge, which is what I have on right now, and it gives you damage resist, and that can work, but that's only one tree, and that's in addition to the dodge. It's not the dodge itself, and the dodge doesn't need that damage resistance to be the best. The reason the dodge is the best is because it's an on-command change in your movement direction that does not have movement acceleration. Now, if you're unfamiliar, movement acceleration is a mechanic in almost every shooter where whenever I strafe in any direction, there's a bit of a startup. I don't go up to my top speed immediately. There's like a half second where I'm ramping up to my top speed. Just like if you're in your car and you were driving, it would take a little bit to get up to your top speed. So as you can see here, just strafing back and forth, every time I change directions, there's a little bit of a delay there. Just a little bit of a slight hesitation that's built in that makes you a little bit easier to hit whenever you change directions. It applies to any direction you're going, even if you're diagonal, it doesn't matter. And what makes dodge so powerful is I can be strafing in this direction and immediately dodge in that direction with no movement acceleration whatsoever. So it allows me to change my direction mid-fight in a completely unpredictable manner without having to do the slowdown and ramp back up to my top speed that you get with the strafe. Now the strafe acceleration may not seem like much, but at a high level where players are really good at anticipating movement and hitting shots, it will make a significant difference. The other problem I see beginner players or players that aren't familiar with Hunter doing is they don't really know when to use dodge. Now, in my opinion, dodge is best used as a means to get to cover. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do this, and I tend to like comboing my dodge with a slide. So, for example, if you're a Hunter player, the fact that you have a dodge means that you can go really far out of cover compared to what most classes could do. So let's say I want to peek this sightline down here really far back. Like, I want to be really safe because maybe I want to cover this angle as well if I need to. So I can go all the way out here as a Hunter because I can take a shot and immediately get myself back into cover. Other classes have to rely on slides to get back to cover, and those require that you flick your aim and sprint and slide. Now, you can do that very fast, but it's still not quite as fast as an instant boom, like that, and I'm into cover. So you always want to try and use your dodge to move to cover, return to cover, get yourself into a safe spot. You really, you're never going to be, peeking with a dodge, right? Like, I'm not going to dodge into the open and then take a shot. That's silly, and that's just asking to get killed for most of the time. Now, in general, one of the most basic ways you'll see people using dodge is they'll slide out, they'll take their shot, and then they'll dodge back into cover immediately. And this can be very effective because you expose yourself for very little. You essentially expose yourself just for the windup and for the follow-up shot. The other way you can use dodge is you can use it to extend your beeline for cover. So let's say I come out here, There's a guy sitting like, I don't know, maybe right there. He's shooting at me. I'm kind of weak. I don't want to fight him. I want to get to cover immediately. So I could run and try and slide. And maybe as I'm sliding, he's shooting at me and moving this way so that this doesn't really provide me much cover. So I have to get all the way over here to the door. Ordinarily, you would have to slide immediately and then slide again, but with Hunter, you can actually slide out, you can dodge out of your slide to extend the distance of your evasive movement. You want to be sliding into cover because sliding keeps your profile low while maintaining your sprint speed, but if you can combo a dodge out of the end of the slide, you're extending the length of time that you're fully compact and moving at max speed in order to reach the cover. So that's something that other classes don't have access to that Hunter does. Okay, I actually forgot to mention something very important about dodge, so I'm adding this in after the initial edits. But that is the fact that dodge breaks tracking. So if you're on console or you're using a controller and you have the aim stickiness, anytime somebody dodges, that is going to break the stickiness of the aim tracking. Now, for those of you on PC, you don't really have to worry about that as much because obviously there's no aim stickiness. There is bullet magnetism on P, but there's no actual aim stickiness where your aim is physically moving on the screen the way a console is. But that doesn't mean that dodge doesn't have any use against mouse and keyboard players, because there are other stuff in the game that do use tracking that are affected by dodge, like grenades. So for example, a swarm grenade like this, if I run up to this and if it's an enemy one and they start tracking me, I can dodge to break the tracking. Now obviously that didn't break it because that's my own grenade and it's not going to track me, but the point remains. Any grenades that use tracking will be affected by this, and it's not just those trip mine grenades. Something like an arc bolt, a fire bolt, even something like a skip grenade is going to not be able to lock onto a dodge. So if I dodge right there, I would have been okay. I dodged a little late, obviously, but you get the idea. And this even applies to stuff like super attacks, because a lot of super attacks have inherent tracking properties. So you want to remember that you can use your dodge as a tool to break tracking at any time. It's especially useful against grenades, but it's also used for stuff like supers and dodging the aim lock on console. Alright, last I want to talk about supers. So Hunter, for pretty much all of Hunter's roaming supers, you can slide into the super activation. So what this means is instead of standing still and getting locked into the animation, if I slide and then pop, you'll see I sort of continued forward. Now that was kind of a bad example because I hit the ledge and it popped me into the air. But you can use that to get yourself around corners if you need, get yourself just more in the face of people, like sliding to the corner as you pop your super so that as you come around it, your super is popped, so that you don't have to run around the corner after popping super and waste precious super time. Now, there's not a lot of crazy movement tech options with Hunter in supers. Arcstrider probably has the most, like with the in-air, light, and then into the heavy to slam. One thing I do want to cover about the Arcstrider, though, is the Arcstrider combo. This is a basic 3-hit combo, and it goes light, light, heavy. If you do this on the ground, light, light, heavy, you'll do the palm strike, which sends, and that's a fail, I did 3 lights, light, light, heavy. That palm strike actually does an insane amount of damage to the point where if you land that on an opponent's super, you will basically one-shot them. So this is extremely important for dueling other supers. Now, something that's really fun about this is you don't actually have to do it straight towards them. So if there's a super right there, Striker, Spectral Blades, another Arcstrider, what have you, coming at me, I don't have to go and pop and go light, light, heavy right at them. I don't have to do that. What I can do is I can light, light, and then turn my camera at the very end. So those 2 lights are actually keeping me away from them, keeping me out of harm's distance so they can't hit me. And then when I'm ready for the last hit of the heavy, you can spin the attack around and hit them. I think controller users actually have an advantage here because I believe they can actually do the lights towards their camera. So I'm holding back on my strafe key and doing lights and I'm going forward. But I'm pretty sure if you do this on controller, you will go towards your camera instead. So controller users can actually light towards themselves and then flip their strafe at the very end for the heavy, whereas PC users you got to do the flick around. Luckily, it doesn't really matter too much, because if you're on mouse and keyboard, flicking around like that is very fast, and it's really not that big of an issue. Alright, moving on to Night Stalker. I want to talk about Spectral Blades, because this super has a few interesting movement options. So, one of the things you have to understand about Spectral Blades is you have cloaked and uncloaked. While you're cloaked, your super meter drains a lot slower. So look at how slow it's draining right now and how long it's taken it to reach halfway. Then when I uncloak, it's going to go much faster and it's going to drain a lot quicker. This is something you have to keep in mind when you're roaming with the super because it's a trade-off. The reason it's a trade-off is because you can use the light attack to move around the map a lot faster. However, you're also draining your super meter a lot faster by doing this. So it's kind of a decision you have to make as to whether or not you want to drain your super faster in order to move faster or take a bit of a more patient approach. Now, the other reason to stay cloaked is that you get damage resistance while you're cloaked. You still have some damage resistance when you're uncloaked, but it's a lot less. And the damage resistance while you're cloaked is actually by far the most damage resistance of any super in the game, at least currently after Bungie made the damage resistance changes to supers. So, in my opinion, if you're approaching a bunch of enemies, I often like to try and stay cloaked as long as possible, especially if they don't notice me. Just in case somebody sees me, somebody shoots me, I'll have that damage resistance going into the fight. And then once I get going, I can lay off the cloak and don't have to do it if I don't want to and if I want to just keep chasing people. One thing to keep in mind is that your heavy attack will put you back into your cloak. It does take a big chunk of your super meter, but sometimes it can be worth it to get that re-cloak, especially if there aren't any enemies nearby. Now, something I do like to do is to use my heavy attack to finish people and use my light attack as a dodge to get close to them. So what I mean by that is, someone's right there, let's say, they're going to be shooting at me. I'll light attack to the side and then use the heavy attack to move back towards them. So not only does the heavy attack kill them and puts me back towards them and cloaks me, but I also use the light attack for the evasion. So that little combo is pretty useful to use. It's not something that you have to use every time, but it's something that I find I like to use if somebody is up close, especially if they've got like a shotgun or something, and you don't want to take a lot of damage all at once. So that is going to do it for the guide today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Hunter is a very, very fun class, especially in PvP when you really get the hang of the movement and the mobility. So even if you're not a Hunter enthusiast, if you haven't tried the class out, I strongly recommend you give it a shot because it can be very, very entertaining to use. So let me know what you learned down in the comments if you guys learned anything. If you have any other tips, be sure to let them know for new players. This is the second in a 3-part series. I've already covered Warlock movement in depth, advanced Warlock movement. You can find that video on my channel. And last, I'm going to be covering Titan movement. So if you're interested in either of those, be sure to hit the subscribe button and stay tuned for more. Once again, my name is Oxy, and I'll see you guys in the next one.